I remember the silence. That was the first thing. Not the cries, not the fear, not the moaning of the sick. Those came later, like waves. But before all of that, there was a silence. A quiet so complete it wrapped around the village like fog. It was the hush of something unseen, creeping toward us with soft, padded feet. I was a child, barely old enough to help in the fields. I didn't understand why the baker stopped singing as he kneaded the dough. I didn't understand why the dogs stopped barking at night. The birds fled first. Then the color drained from everything. It was spring, but the flowers never bloomed again. They said it came from the east. They whispered about caravans and rats and something foul on the ships in the harbor. But all of that was far from our little hamlet nestled in the hills. We didn't need foreign ships. The death came anyway. It always comes, doesn't it? I don't remember the first body. I remember the third. My sister. Her cheeks flushed deep crimson, her eyes glassy. I thought she had been kissed by angels. But the next day, she was still, and her skin was black at the edges. That was when I learned what the plague was. The terror wasn't just in the dying, though God knows that was horror enough. No, the real terror was in surviving. You see, when everyone you know dies in their sleep, when the village bells ring not for weddings or births but only for funerals, and then they stop ringing altogether because there's no one left to ring them, what are you then? I buried them. I buried my sister with my bare hands. My mother next. Then my father. I don't know how I didn't fall ill. Perhaps I already had, and lived. Or perhaps I was cursed to walk amid the rot, and not be claimed. The dead were kinder than the living. Those who survived, changed. The priest burned the holy books. He said the words meant nothing anymore. He drank until he forgot his own name, then wandered into the forest, and never came back. The midwife sat beside her empty cottage, brushing the hair of a rag doll made from the linens of the dead. I once saw her feeding it stew made from roots and tears. There was no trust, no love, no joy. If you knocked on a door, it would remain closed, no matter how much you wept. If you screamed in the night, no one came. We were afraid of each other, afraid that someone breathing might bring more death. And so we became ghosts. Not dead, not quite living. Wandering, hoarding food, praying without words. I walked to the next village, and the next, each one more silent than the last. Rows of houses with doors ajar, shutters flapping, cradles rocking in the breeze. Sometimes I saw a face in a window, pale and wide-eyed, but it vanished when I looked again. I once found a boy sitting in the ashes of a burnt farmhouse. He had hair like straw and eyes too old for his years. I asked his name. He didn't answer, just pointed to a mound of dirt behind the barn. 7 crosses stood in a crooked row. He was the 8th. We sat in silence. That was the kindest moment I knew that year. The plague ended, they say, burned itself out, like fire. Or perhaps it simply got bored of us, left the wreckage behind and moved on. But we didn't return to life. Life, as we knew it, had gone with the last breath of the last joyful child. Even the seasons forgot how to turn. Summer was gray. Winter didn't bring snow, only damp and rot. The cows birthed calves with hollow eyes. The trees dropped fruit that tasted of ash. The church bells never rang again, even when a new priest came. Some said it was punishment. Others said it was a test. I say it was a mirror. We looked into it and saw what we are when all is stripped away. When law, faith, and comfort fall like rotting leaves. We are beasts, and angels, and nothing. Years passed. I grew old. Or perhaps just tired. I stopped marking the days. I stopped naming the stars. I just watched and waited. For what, I'm still unsure. Sometimes I meet another soul. We nod. We don't ask names. It's safer that way. Some offer bread. Others offer silence. Both are welcome. We sit by the fire and say nothing. But in that nothing, there's a kind of song. A lullaby for the dying world. And when I lie down to sleep, when the wind whispers through the broken shutters, I remember that long ago silence before the first cry. It never truly left. It waits like me. The seasons turned again, or so I thought. The trees lost their leaves, but new ones never quite came. They trembled with a kind of memory, as if afraid to begin again. I lived in a cottage on the edge of what was once a village. The well was dry. The paths had disappeared beneath moss and vines. But I stayed, because there was nowhere else to go. The days were long and pale. The sun rose without warmth. It was a tired sun, stretched thin in the sky like old parchment. I kept to myself, mostly. I had grown afraid of voices, even my own. Sound made things real, and there was so little I wanted to believe in anymore. Sometimes I spoke aloud, but only to the dead. "Good morning, Thomas," I would say to the crooked grave beneath the yew tree. He was my neighbor, once. He raised pigs and believed in omens. When the clouds formed the shape of a hand above the village, he packed his things and ran east. The hand found him anyway. There was a day when I thought the world might be healing. I saw a fox, a real one, with russet fur and clever eyes. It darted across the clearing, not sickly or slow, but alive. That night I lit a candle for the first time in months. I almost wept at the glow. But the next morning, I found the fox again. Its body lay beside the stream, mouth open, flies already circling. Hope was a cruel thing. It always came too early and left too soon. The worst part, I think, was remembering how life used to feel. Warm bread. Singing during harvest. The way the sky would turn gold before a storm. These memories clung to me like the scent of old smoke, comforting, but impossible to live in. I began walking further each day, not searching for people. I no longer believed in people. I walked to prove the earth still existed, that it hadn't collapsed into dust when we vanished from it. One morning, I followed a path I didn't recognize. It wound between trees I swear hadn't been there before. I heard wind chimes, faint and hollow. I followed them until I reached a garden, untouched, perfect. Roses bloomed as if they didn't know the world had ended. A woman sat on a bench, weaving thread through her fingers. She didn't look up. "Is this real?" I asked. She smiled but said nothing. Her hands kept moving. The thread glowed faintly, like moonlight. I sat beside her, and we watched the roses breathe. She was gone when I woke. Maybe she had never been. Maybe I'd fallen asleep beside an old scarecrow and dreamed her into life. Still, I found a petal in my pocket. I kept walking after that. I moved from ruin to ruin, like a shadow drifting through a graveyard. Each village was a memory made of wood and stone. I stopped counting the skulls. I stopped naming the ghosts. They walked with me now, silent, always behind my shoulder. Sometimes I thought I heard them humming. At night I built small fires, not for warmth, for company. The flame was a voice I could understand. It cracked and whispered. It had no judgment, no demands. One evening, I came upon a church without a roof. Ivy wrapped the altar. Pigeons had nested where sermons once echoed. I climbed the bell tower out of habit, out of ritual. There was no bell, just open sky. I sat at the top for hours, staring into the clouds. I tried to pray, but I'd forgotten the words. I only remembered the feeling, that heavy hush in your chest when you hope someone hears you, even if no one answers. That night I dreamed of a feast. All the villagers were there. My sister, the priest, even the boy with the straw hair. They passed me plates of food that smelled like sunlight and honey. No one spoke, but they smiled. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid. I woke with tears in my beard. And for a moment, I thought the dream had been real. But the fire had gone cold. The sky was gray. And I was alone. But the fear didn't come back right away. That was new. The absence of fear was not peace. It was quieter than that, like the silence after a funeral, when all the weeping has been done, and only the sound of the wind remains. I walked without knowing why. I had no destination, but my feet moved, and the earth still held me. That seemed enough. One morning, or perhaps it was afternoon, I came across a road. A real one, cobbled, half buried beneath weeds and dirt. My fingers brushed against the stones like they were relics. Roads meant people once. Travel, trade, laughter. Now they only led to echoes. Still, I followed it. After a day and a night, I saw a wall in the distance. Not a village. A city, or what remained of one. The gates hung open, the iron rusted, vines crawling up the stone like fingers. I stepped inside. There was no guard, no baker, no carts or chickens. Just wind, and the quiet settling of dust. But the city was not empty. I saw movement in the shadows. Not rats, though there were many. People, or shapes like people. They drifted from alley to alley, avoiding the light. Some covered their faces. Others wore masks shaped like birds. I remembered those, plague doctors, though there was no one left to heal. Only habit clinging like mold. A woman stood near a fountain, staring into the dry basin. Her dress was torn lace, stained with age. I approached slowly, as one might approach a deer. She turned to me. Her eyes were milk-white, but she seemed to see me anyway. "You didn't die," she said. Her voice was soft, almost kind. "No," I answered. "Did you?" She smiled, and I realized I wasn't sure whether I was speaking to the living or the dead. We sat by the fountain for a long time. She spoke of dreams, endless halls filled with mirrors, voices calling from behind locked doors, children laughing in languages she didn't know. I listened. Sometimes that's all you can do when the world has stopped. Listen to its last murmurs. When I rose to leave, she didn't stop me. Just nodded, as if we had both played our part. That night, I found shelter in the ruins of a library. Most of the books were gone, eaten by rats or fire. But one remained sealed in a metal box. I pried it open. It was a journal, written in careful, slanted script. We thought the sickness would pass. We thought we were stronger than the darkness. But the darkness was inside us. It still is. I closed the book and held it to my chest. The words weren't comforting, but they were true. That was enough. In time, I came to find others like me. Survivors. Or wanderers. Or ghosts still clinging to skin and breath. We didn't rebuild. Not really. We didn't want to make new towns. We only wanted fire and silence and the company of those who remembered. We made small camps, lit candles, shared soup made from roots. We told stories, not to entertain, but to remind each other that we had been real once. And at night, when the stars returned, faint and pale, we listened for the wind. If it was gentle, we slept. If it howled, we stayed awake and kept the fire lit. I met a boy once, younger than most I'd seen, barely 12. He still had wonder in his eyes. He asked me why I never smiled. I told him, because the plague taught me that smiling is dangerous. It makes you believe things will last. He didn't understand. That was good. He shouldn't have. And yet, that night I dreamed of laughter. It woke me. Not my own. Someone else's. Far off. But real. It wasn't loud, the laughter. It came faintly, like a breeze through broken glass. But it was laughter nonetheless. Not the cruel kind children sometimes make when they poke at a dying bird. No, this was warm. Unreasonably warm. I sat up. My fire had gone out, yet the coals still glowed with that strange, comforting pulse. The others, the old woman, the mute boy, the man with fingers always trembling, were still asleep, or pretending to be. I rose and followed the sound. It led me past the edge of camp, through a path worn only by deer and ghosts. I saw lanterns hanging from tree branches, made from jars and wax, swaying gently though the night was still. As I walked, the laughter grew softer, like someone wrapping it in cloth. And then I saw them. A ring of people, seated in a clearing, cross-legged on moss that shimmered faintly in moonlight. They weren't talking. Just smiling. just being. In the center was a little girl, pale, barefoot, her dress in tatters but her face peaceful, serene in a way I hadn't seen in years. She was humming. The tune was familiar. A lullaby, maybe, or something from before. I watched them for a long time. Hours, maybe. The trees didn't move. The moon didn't rise or fall. Time stayed where it was, unwilling to interrupt. Eventually, the girl stood and looked at me. "You're still afraid," she said. Not cruelly. Not even sadly. Just as if stating the weather. "Yes," I answered. "You don't need to be." "I know," I said. But I didn't believe it. She tilted her head. "Do you remember what bread tastes like?" That question struck me harder than any plague ever could. I opened my mouth, but no words came. Just a memory, hot crust, steam rising, fingers burned from impatience, butter melting too fast. The girl smiled, then turned and walked into the forest. The others followed, one by one. I tried to follow too, but my feet wouldn't move. Or maybe I chose not to. I stood there until morning, surrounded by nothing but moss and cold. The next day, the others in camp said nothing. But their silence had changed. It wasn't the heavy silence of despair. It was the waiting silence of spring. When the frost is gone but the blooms haven't arrived yet. We sat together more after that. Not always speaking, but we gathered our fires closer. We shared stories, old ones. The kind with endings. The kind where someone lives. Sometimes I still walk the ruins. Not searching, just remembering. I passed through a town once where a single tavern still stood, miraculously whole. Dusty mugs on the shelves. A lute with broken strings. I sat at a table and tried to imagine voices there. The slosh of ale. The roar of a song. It didn't come. But I didn't cry either. I left a candle before I went. For the ghosts. For the music. For whatever remained. In time, we found more people. Survivors like us. Not many. Not enough to call it a village, not yet. But they came. Drawn by smoke, or rumor, or the simple ache of not being alone anymore. And with them came things I had almost forgotten. Chickens. Bread. A baby's cry. One man planted onions. Said he didn't care if they grew, only that something went into the soil again. Another woman started making clay cups. They broke easily, but she made them anyway, just to hold water in her hands. It was terrifying, all of it, because to build again was to hope again, and hope was what the plague had broken in us most of all. I still feared the sound of laughter, still flinched at coughing, still dreamed of empty cradles and burning churches. But now, in the quiet of dusk, when the fire crackled and someone hummed without realizing it, I didn't feel alone anymore. And sometimes, just before sleep, I remembered that little girl's question. "Do you remember what bread tastes like?" Yes, I do now. Spring came, not with joy, but with hesitation. Like someone afraid to knock at a ruined door. It didn't announce itself. It crept in. A little less frost on the grass. A bird call in the distance that didn't sound like morning. A shadow that moved, not because of fear, but because the sun had shifted. We didn't celebrate. We watched. I remember the first green shoot pushing up through a crack in the stone near the old well. We stood around it like it was a miracle. No one dared touch it. One woman cried. Not from happiness. From memory. I think it reminded her of something she'd buried. And yet it grew. Some of us began clearing ground. Not with the purpose of before, not with charts and crop plans and harvest festivals. We cleared the ground like you clean a grave. Slowly, carefully, knowing it might be for nothing, but doing it anyway. The mute boy found a kitten in the ashes of a barn. A thin, trembling thing with one blue eye. He didn't name it. None of us did. Naming had weight, and we were still too thin for that. But the kitten followed him, and sometimes curled up near the fire. It purred like wine through Hollywood. In the evenings we sat closer. We didn't speak of the plague. Not directly. But we spoke around it. Like how we no longer feared the scent of rosemary, or how we started washing our hands even when they weren't dirty. Someone laughed once, by accident, and we all froze. Then someone else smiled. Then it passed like a wave. Quiet. Fragile. Real. A young man painted a door. Just a door. Bright blue, on a leaning house with no roof. When we asked him why, he said, "So it will be waiting, if someone ever comes home." That night I dreamed of bells. Not the tolling kind. The celebratory ones. Distant. Hollow. But hopeful. When I woke, I walked to the field with the green shoot. There were now 3. One was bending, just a little, toward the sun. And I found I was no longer afraid of watching things grow. By then, silence had taken on new shapes. It wasn't the silence of death anymore. It was something gentler, like linen drying in the wind, or the hush just before someone speaks, but chooses instead to listen. We were learning to live again, but not like before. Before had been loud, busy, full of things that now felt impossible. Festivals, crowds, shouting in markets. Now we moved slowly, carefully, not from fear anymore, but from reverence. As if the world had become fragile, and we didn't want to crack it again. I spent many mornings just watching the sky. It was wider than I remembered, less burdened. Clouds moved like they had nothing to do but wander. I envied them. Then I forgave them. The dead don't get to wander. Only the living do. Someone began to carve things. A woman with hands like bark. She took pieces of broken wood, fallen beams, splintered doors, and turned them into animals. Birds with tilted heads, foxes with crooked tails, horses that looked too tired to run, but stood anyway. We placed them along the path into our little camp. Not for decoration. For memory. For protection, maybe. The mute boy left the kitten at my doorstep one morning. It was bigger now. Thinner in some places, thicker in others. Its fur was patchy, but its purr was still steady. I named it Ash, though I didn't say the name aloud. Only in my mind, where names were safer. Sometimes I still walked into the old cities. Not to find people, there weren't many, but to feel the echo of what had been. The stone remembered. So did the stairwells. So did the broken windows and empty chairs. I once found a room where someone had scrawled a prayer across the walls. The same line, over and over. Let it pass. Let it pass. Let it pass. It had. And it hadn't. One afternoon, while gathering wood near the edge of the river, I saw something strange. A boat. Small, patched with cloth and rope, drifting slowly along the current. Inside it, 3 figures. One was steering. The others watched the shore. They didn't call out. Neither did I. But the woman steering raised her hand. Not a wave. Just a sign that she had seen me and would remember. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake listening to the trees. They were beginning to sound like themselves again. Less creaking. More whispering. I heard the wind moving through the leaves and thought, it sounds like breath. Everything now felt like breath. Soft. Shallow. Careful. Present. I came across the house in late summer. It stood alone, far from the edge of the camp, leaning slightly to the left as if it had grown tired of standing properly. The roof had collapsed on one side, and ivy had made a quiet empire of the windows. There was no door, just a hollow where one must have been. Still, something about it felt lived in. I stepped inside. The floor creaked. The dust didn't rise, there was none. The air smelled faintly of dried herbs. Lavender, maybe, or thyme. I wasn't sure anymore. Smells had become rare visitors, like rain or joy. Easily forgotten, quietly missed. In the corner of the room was a chair. Woven, handmade, its legs uneven. Someone had placed a bundle of dried flowers on the seat. I didn't know why, but I sat down, and I stayed there for hours. No one came. Nothing happened. But I remember that day as one of the first when I didn't think about the plague. Not directly. Not as a weight pressing on my chest. It was still there, of course, like a scar, like a shadow, but that day. In that house with no door, I simply sat. And I was not afraid. Later, when I returned to camp, I told no one about the house. Not because I wanted to keep it for myself, but because I didn't know how to describe it. How do you describe a silence that feels like kindness? Or a broken place that still offers rest? Some things aren't meant to be named. They're meant to be returned to. So I did. Again and again. Some evenings I brought the cat. Some mornings I brought bread. Once I brought a book with no cover and read it aloud to the empty space. The words didn't matter. It was the sound of reading that felt important, as if the walls themselves had been starving for stories. One day, I left behind my old coat. It was torn at the sleeve and smelled of ash and thyme. I draped it over the chair and whispered, "Thank you." I don't know who I was thanking. The house. The memory of someone. The absence of fear. Maybe all of them. Maybe none. As the days grew shorter again, I felt the ache of winter begin to stir beneath the soil. But this time, we were ready. Or rather, willing. We gathered firewood without panic. We preserved what little we grew. We didn't speak of survival anymore. We spoke of staying, of being here, together. And in the coldest evenings, when breath hung like mist and silence wrapped the camp like a second skin, someone would always hum. Not the same tune. Not always in key, but always softly. And we would fall asleep to the sound of it. As if the world, at last, had begun to sing us back into itself. Winter came like a slow sigh, settling over the land with a quiet persistence. The trees stood bare, their branches etched sharply against a pale, gray sky. The earth hardened beneath a thin crust of ice, and the river slowed to a near whisper beneath its frozen skin. We gathered close to the fires we had built, small flames flickering bravely in the cold. The smoke curled upward like a fragile thread, carrying with it prayers we could no longer speak aloud. The nights were long, endless, filled with a silence so complete it felt as though the world itself was holding its breath. But in that silence, we found a strange comfort. The absence of sound was not empty, it was full of memory. It held all that had come before, and all that was yet to come. We told stories, not the ones we had told before, tales of kings and battles, of festivals and markets. No, these stories were softer, quieter. They were about small things, the taste of spring rain, the warmth of a friend's hand, the way a kitten's purr could chase away a nightmare. Sometimes I would wake in the dark and hear the boy's soft breathing nearby. The kitten, now full-grown, curled at his feet. I would watch them both for a moment, and a strange hope would rise inside me, fragile, flickering, like the flame of a candle in the wind. Outside, the plague's shadow still lingered, an unspoken presence in every cough, every sudden chill. But inside our circle, it was as though we were shielded by something stronger, something born of shared silence and quiet care. One night, as the stars blinked coldly overhead, I stepped outside the camp. The world was still and white, a blank page waiting for a new story. I looked up at the sky, tracing constellations I barely remembered. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I whispered into the night. "We are here." The wind answered soft and sure, as if to say, "And you always will be." With winter's grip beginning to loosen, the world felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for something it had almost forgotten. The frost still kissed the edges of leaves, but beneath the cold, the earth was stirring quietly, as if waking from a long, uneasy sleep. Each morning, I would watch the horizon for the faintest glow, the first light of dawn, that promised the coming of spring. Sometimes it was just a thin sliver of pale pink, other times a gentle wash of gold that spilled slowly across the sky. This light was fragile, shy, but persistent. In the camp, the days grew longer, and with them, the stirring of life. The kitten, now a full-grown cat named Ash, hunted near the edges of the forest. bringing back small gifts that no one asked for but all of us treasured. The boy who once said nothing began to hum softly sometimes, a tune without words but filled with feeling. When he did, the camp grew warmer, as if his voice was a small sun glowing in the cold. We began planting again, though cautiously, knowing the earth was still tired and unpredictable. Seeds were pressed into the soil with hands both hopeful and hesitant, as if coaxing the ground to remember how to give. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky blushed with the colors of farewell, I walked alone to the edge of the river. The ice had melted away, and the water moved freely, singing a quiet song. I knelt by the shore and let my fingers trail in the cool flow. The river did not ask for anything, did not judge or hurry. It simply moved, steady and true. I whispered to the river, to the night, to the fragile light. We are still here. We will go on. And the river answered in its timeless way, carrying my words downstream into the wide, waiting world. Days folded into each other with a soft rhythm, a slow dance between light and shadow, cold and warmth. The camp became a place of small miracles, sprouting shoots pushing bravely through thawed earth, the steady rise and fall of shared breath, the soft patting of ashes paws on dry leaves. We didn't speak much about what was lost anymore. Instead, we spoke in glances, in small acts, a hand reaching out to steady a trembling one, a loaf of bread broken quietly in two, a shared blanket wrapped around shoulders aching with cold. Hope, once a fragile thread, grew taut and strong, though none of us dared say its name aloud. One afternoon, the mute boy brought a piece of blue cloth, faded and torn, and tied it to a sapling near the camp. He smiled, a rare and careful smile, as if the cloth was a signal, a promise to the world and to ourselves that we would keep growing, no matter what. I watched the cloth flutter softly in the breeze, a quiet flag raised in a land still healing. That night, we gathered around the fire and hummed together, no one needing to lead, no one needing to follow. The melody was simple and unpolished, but it held the weight of survival and the fragile beauty of new beginnings. Outside, the stars shone cold and distant, but inside, warmth bloomed quietly in the circle of our lives. And in the deepest stillness before sleep, I heard the softest whisper echo through the dark. It will pass, and we will remain. The days grew warmer still, and with the passing of each sunrise, the world seemed to remember itself a little more. The forests whispered again, soft and slow, as if awakening from a long dream. Leaves unfurled like shy hands reaching toward a new day. We moved with a quiet purpose, not rushing, but tending to the fragile shoots of life that stretched toward the light. Each breath felt like a gift, each step a careful promise. The boy who once spoke only in silence began to find new ways to communicate. A nod here, a smile there, and sometimes a soft word that barely rose above the crackling fire. We learned to listen differently, to understand the spaces between sound. Ash, the cat, grew bold, chasing butterflies and curling in the sun like a small, living ember. His presence was a reminder that life, despite everything, could still be soft and warm. One morning, I found a wildflower blooming near the edge of the old well. It was small, blue, and delicate, trembling in the breeze. I knelt beside it and whispered a silent thanks. The world was healing, slowly, quietly, like a whispered secret shared between old friends. And in that healing, I found a gentle return, not just of the earth or the seasons, but of something deeper, the return of hope, wrapped not in grand gestures, but in small, steady moments. The days lengthened, each sunrise carrying a promise wrapped in the soft light of morning. It wasn't a promise shouted from mountaintops, but a quiet one whispered in the rustle of leaves and the gentle touch of the wind on skin. We began to gather more than just food. We gathered memories, fragments of laughter, glimmers of old songs, traces of hands once held. These were the treasures that no plague could steal. The boy, once so silent, started to trace pictures in the dirt, shapes of birds, of trees, of the sun. His fingers trembled at first, unsure, but grew steadier with each new dawn. Ash watched him with green eyes full of understanding, as if they both knew that this was more than just play. It was reclaiming a world that had nearly slipped away. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in bruised purples and pinks, we sat around the fire. No words were needed, just the soft crackle of flames, the warmth spreading through chilled bones, and the steady beat of hearts learning to hope again. Outside, the stars blinked awake, cool and distant, but inside, a soft light glowed, born not from fire, but from the quiet strength of those who dared to remain. And in that gentle light, I felt it most clearly. Tomorrow would come. The world was not the same as before. It could never be. The plague had carved deep lines into the land and the hearts of those who survived, but somehow life, stubborn and slow, began to thread itself through the cracks. The mornings were cooler now, touched with the crispness of early autumn. The air smelled faintly of damp earth and fallen leaves, a scent so ordinary it almost felt miraculous after so much silence. I spent long hours wandering the edges of the camp, watching the trees sway with a gentle, tired grace. Their leaves, tinged with gold and amber, whispered secrets only the wind could understand. There was a rhythm again, subtle and fragile, but undeniable. Around the fire, we no longer just survived. We began to remember what it meant to live. The new boy, whose eyes held the depth of oceans, started teaching me the shapes he carved in the dirt. Each symbol was a story, a prayer, a hope given form. Sometimes he would draw a circle, endless, unbroken, and I thought it meant the cycle of life, even when it felt like everything had stopped. Ash, with his rough fur and quiet steps, became a symbol of this new world. Watching him move with ease, chasing shadows or curling up beside a sleeping child, was a reminder that life could be soft, even after the hardest storms. One afternoon, I found an old book buried beneath the rubble of a collapsed building. Its pages were torn and yellowed, but the words inside sang to me like a forgotten lullaby. I brought it back to camp and read aloud by firelight, the voices of long-gone storytellers filling the night air once more. The children gathered close, wide-eyed and silent, soaking in the sound of stories that were no longer just memories but threads weaving us together again. At night, when the fire burned low and the stars scattered like spilled silver, I would lie awake listening to the gentle breathing of those around me. The weight of loss was still there, a shadow lingering just beyond the glow. But it no longer crushed us. Instead, it shaped us, hardened us, made us tender in ways the world before could not. And in that tenderness, I felt a quiet promise take root, that even in the darkest times, the human spirit bends but does not break. The days stretch long and slow, like the steady pulse of a deep and measured breath. The world, scarred but not broken, began to breathe again, each inhale carrying the faint scent of possibility, each exhale a release of old sorrow. Morning light spilled softly over the hills, touching the tips of the trees and setting the dew-dappled grass alight with a gentle shimmer. The earth was awakening from its forced sleep, and with it, we were awakening too, not hurriedly, not with loud triumph, but with the quiet patience of those who have learned to cherish every fragile moment. I wandered through the woods, listening to the whispers of the wind tangled in the branches. Each sound was a small miracle, the rustle of a squirrel's tail, the distant call of a bird finding its voice again, the soft crunch of dry leaves beneath careful feet. These tiny echoes of life were precious to us, fragments of a world once thought lost. At the camp, we worked with slow hands and steady hearts. We tended the small garden where shoots pushed bravely through dark soil, their green tips reaching toward the sky like quiet prayers. The earth was still unpredictable, and the seeds fragile, but we planted anyway, because to plant was to hope, and to hope was to live. The boy who spoke so little now moved with a new purpose. His fingers, once hesitant, traced symbols in the dirt with a deliberate grace, circles and lines, marks that held meaning only he seemed to understand. Sometimes he would press his palm to the earth and close his eyes, as if listening to a voice only the ground could speak. Ash the cat became a constant companion. His fur was now thick and soft, his eyes bright and alert. He hunted quietly, returning with small gifts, a bird's feather, a fallen leaf, a smooth stone worn by the river. We accepted these tokens as signs that life, no matter how fragile, persisted. In the evenings, we gathered near the fire, the flames flickering and casting dancing shadows on tired faces. No one spoke much, but the silence was warm, filled with unspoken understanding. Occasionally, someone would hum a gentle tune, not a song of joy or celebration, but a lullaby of survival, of endurance, of the slow return of peace. One night, under a sky thick with stars, I sat outside the circle of firelight, feeling the cool earth beneath my hands. The world was quiet except for the soft chorus of crickets and the whisper of the wind. I breathed deeply, letting the calm wash over me like a tide. I thought of those we had lost, of the empty places where laughter once lived, and of the quiet strength that had carried us through the darkest hours. And in that stillness, I found a seed of something new, not just hope, but a promise. A promise that no matter how deep the night, dawn would come. That no matter how fierce the storm, the earth would heal. That no matter how heavy the sorrow, life would find a way. And as the first light of morning brushed the horizon, soft and pale, I felt the weight in my chest begin to lift, carried away on the breath of a world slowly waking. As the days turned steadily warmer, the earth beneath our feet began to pulse with quiet life. Beneath the cracked soil, tender roots stretched slowly, reaching for water and the soft light filtering through the canopy above. It was a hidden world of growth, invisible but powerful, reminding us that healing often happens beneath the surface, slow, unseen, but unstoppable. We learned to listen more closely to this hidden pulse. The boy, whose silence had once seemed endless, now sat by the river's edge tracing patterns in the sand. His fingers moved with care, painting symbols that seemed to echo the rhythm of the earth itself. Sometimes, when no one was watching, he whispered those symbols aloud, words too soft to carry far but filled with meaning all the same. The cat, Ash, was a shadow that moved with purpose and grace. He was our small guardian, slipping between the trees and returning with gifts: a feather, a shiny stone, a small bundle of moss. Each token was a reminder that even in the quietest corners of the world, life flourished. At the camp, we built slowly. Not grand structures or monuments, but homes made of kindness and quiet endurance. We shared food and stories, laughter and tears, weaving ourselves back into a community that had been torn apart. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in soft hues of orange and lavender, I wandered into the nearby meadow. Wildflowers swayed gently in the breeze, their colors muted but alive. I knelt to touch the petals, fragile and warm beneath my fingers. It was there, in that simple moment, that I felt the full weight of what it meant to survive, not just to live, but to care deeply, to nurture gently, to keep the roots of hope alive even when the branches seemed broken. The night settled around us like a soft blanket. We gathered close to the fire, the flames crackling softly and casting a warm glow on faces worn but unbowed. Someone hummed a melody, quiet, tender, imperfect, and we joined in, our voices weaving a lullaby for a world slowly healing. Outside, the stars blinked softly, distant but steady. And as I closed my eyes, I felt the earth breathe beneath me, slow, steady, and full of promise. In the coolness of early morning, when the world was still wrapped in a thin veil of mist, I often found myself wandering alone. The forest was quiet, not empty, but waiting to be heard, to be felt, to be understood again. The silence was not the absence of sound, but a deep, slow song. The rustling of leaves, the distant drip of water from the branches, the soft patting of Ash's paws on mossy ground, these were the notes of a melody too old to remember, but too precious to forget. The boy, too, seemed to sense this song. He would sit for long hours by the river, watching the currents weave their way through rocks and roots. Sometimes he would hum a soft tune, a sound so faint that it felt like a secret shared between the water and the wind. We never asked him to speak. Words had become heavy burdens in this fragile world. Instead, we learned to listen with our eyes, with our hearts, to the quiet language of presence and touch. Life was returning in small ways. The garden began to bloom with shy greens. The air smelled faintly of fresh earth and growing things, and the nights were no longer filled with fear, but with the soft glow of trust. One evening, as the sky faded into deep blue and the first stars blinked awake, I sat by the fire and watched the faces around me, faces etched with loss, but also with a newfound calm. We were no longer just survivors. We were becoming something else. something tender and enduring. Ash curled at my feet, purring softly. The boy reached out his hand, and I took it gently, feeling the quiet strength in his grasp. And as the firelight flickered and the night deepened, I understood that this was the true healing. The silent songs sung not with words, but with love, with presence, with the gentle rhythm of being together. The plague had taken much from us, but it had not taken this. And that, I realized, was everything. The world had settled into a fragile new rhythm, one measured not by the ticking of clocks or the bustle of crowds, but by the breathe between moments, the gentle pauses where life seemed to hold its shape and listen. Morning light came softly, slipping through the trees in long, golden fingers that touched the earth with quiet reverence. The air was cool but no longer biting, filled instead with the subtle sense of moss, damp soil, and distant blossoms beginning to bloom. Each day was a delicate unfolding, like a flower slowly opening in the shade. We moved through these days with careful steps, not rushing but savoring the gentle persistence of time itself. The boy, whose silence was once a vast ocean, now filled some of that space with small sounds, a soft hum, a whispered word, the brush of fingers against leaves. These were gifts we accepted with open hearts, reminders that even the quietest voice could carry the deepest meaning. Ash prowled near the edge of the forest, his sharp eyes catching every flicker of movement. He was a creature of instinct and grace, a living thread connecting us to the wild world beyond our fragile camp. In the garden, new life pushed through the earth with stubborn courage. Tiny green shoots, tender and trembling, reached toward the sun. Each leaf was a small victory, a testament to the power of growth even after devastation. We tended the soil and each other, our hands steady and sure despite the scars we carried. In the evenings, as shadows lengthened and the air cooled, we gathered around the fire. The flames danced and sputtered, casting flickering light on faces lined with loss but shining with quiet strength. Stories began to return to us, not grand tales of glory or conquest, but simple memories. A laugh shared on a warm afternoon, the taste of fresh bread, the feel of a mother's hand in yours. These stories wove us back together, thread by fragile thread. Sometimes the boy would trace those symbols in the dirt again, his fingers moving with gentle certainty. I would watch, mesmerized, feeling as if he was drawing the invisible connections between the past and the future, between loss and hope. One night, as the stars hung cold and distant above, I stood alone at the edge of the forest. The silence was complete, a deep and heavy quiet that pressed against the chest. But beneath it, I could feel the steady pulse of the earth, slow, steady, unyielding. I breathed deeply, letting the calm seep into my bones. The weight of grief remained, but it no longer crushed me. Instead, it became part of the landscape of my heart, a place where sorrow and love could coexist. And as the first pale light of dawn began to creep across the horizon, I knew this was the true survival. Not merely to exist, but to carry the past gently and move forward with open eyes and a hopeful heart. The passage of time had lost its sharp edges. There were no more frantic rushes, no sudden upheavals. Instead, each day moved like a slow dance, deliberate, unhurried, and full of small, meaningful moments. The sun rose gently each morning, spreading a soft, golden light across the quiet fields. Mist hovered like a delicate veil over the meadows, and the air smelled of fresh earth and awakening life. It was a scent that stirred something deep inside, a quiet reassurance that the world was not done with us. We learned again to read the subtle language of the land, the way the wind whispered through the trees, the way the soil crumbled softly beneath our fingers, the way the river sang its endless song as it wound through the valley. Nature was no longer a backdrop for human drama. It was a living, breathing presence that held us gently in its embrace. The boy, who had once been a shadow among us, grew into a quiet guide. His drawings in the dirt became stories, stories that needed no words but spoke volumes in their simple shapes and lines. We gathered around to watch, to learn, to remember that even silence can carry a message if we listen with our hearts. Ash, now sleek and strong, moved through the underbrush like a silent guardian. His emerald eyes watched over us all, a reminder that life continued in all its quiet beauty, even after the worst storms. At night, the fire was our hearth, our center, our comfort. Its warmth melted away the chill that sometimes settled deep in the bones. We shared not just food but memories, fragments of laughter, shadows of old songs, pieces of stories that had once filled the air with life. Sometimes, I would close my eyes and listen to the fire's crackle, letting its rhythm sync with my heartbeat. The world felt suspended between past and future, held in a fragile balance where healing quietly took root. The scars left by the plague were still there, etched into the land and our souls. But they no longer defined us. Instead, they became part of the story we were telling, a story of endurance, of fragile hope, of the slow dance between darkness and light. And as the stars blinked awake in the velvet sky, I felt a deep peace settle over me. The night was no longer a place of fear but a quiet promise that no matter how long the journey, we were moving forward, step by gentle step, toward the soft light of tomorrow. Morning unfurled slowly, like a gentle sigh, pulling the night's shadows away with soft hands. The sky was a pale canvas, streaked with the faintest blush of pink and gold, and the air held a cool freshness, touched by dew and the distant hum of awakening life. We moved carefully through these early hours, not driven by urgency but guided by the quiet pulse of the earth. Every step was measured, every breath taken with the deliberate care of those who understood that survival was a delicate balance between patience and hope. The boy sat near the riverbank, his fingers tracing lazy patterns in the wet sand. His eyes were distant but calm, reflecting the slow, flowing water before him. In that moment, it seemed as if the river carried not just water, but the endless stream of time, past, present, and future merging softly into one. Ash lay curled beneath a tree, his fur ruffled by a gentle breeze. He twitched occasionally, chasing dreams of birds or the rustle of leaves. His quiet presence was a balm, a reminder that even in the smallest things, life found its way to continue. We gathered herbs and wild greens, tending the small patch of earth that had become our garden. The soil was rich and dark, promising new growth, and the plants stretched toward the light with a stubborn determination that mirrored our own. As the sun climbed higher, warmth spread through the clearing, melting away the chill of dawn. Birds called out, their songs tentative but full of life, weaving a delicate soundtrack for our slow return to normalcy. Around the fire, stories began to flow again, soft, half-remembered tales of better times, spoken in voices that trembled with both sadness and hope. We shared these stories as if passing a fragile thread from hand to hand, weaving a tapestry of memory that would carry us forward. In the stillness between words, I felt the weight of all we had endured, and yet also the fragile beauty of what remained, the quiet strength of those who lived, the gentle bonds that tied us together, the slow, steady breath of the earth beneath our feet. The plague had carved deep wounds, but it could not silence the enduring song of life. And in that song, I found a calm that reached down to the very core of my being. The days grew warmer, each one unfolding like a delicate bloom. There was no hurry in the way the world moved now, only a slow, steady unfolding, as if life itself was learning to tread softly after so much upheaval. The sun poured golden light over the hills and through the branches, casting long shadows that danced quietly on the forest floor. The air was thick with the scent of wild flowers and rich earth, a fragrant promise of renewal. I found myself walking more often into the woods, drawn by the quiet rhythms of the natural world. The rustle of leaves underfoot, the distant call of a bird, the gentle murmur of a stream, these sounds wove a soft tapestry around me, a lullaby of resilience. The boy was there beside me, his gaze steady, his hands carefully tracing shapes in the dirt. Sometimes he paused to listen, to the wind, the trees, or the faint pulse of life beneath the soil. His silence no longer felt empty but full of meaning, a quiet strength that spoke louder than words. Ash moved like a shadow, slipping between the trees with grace and purpose. He hunted and explored, always returning with small treasures, a feather, a shiny stone, a sprig of herbs, gifts from the wild, tokens of life's persistence. Back at camp, the garden flourished under our careful hands. Shoots pushed through the soil, green and vibrant against the dark earth. We tended the plants as if caring for fragile hopes, each leaf a small victory against the silence left by loss. Evenings were our refuge. We gathered around the fire, its warm glow chasing away the chill and the memories that sometimes threatened to overwhelm. We spoke little, but the quiet was not heavy. It was filled with understanding, shared sorrow, and a gentle determination to keep moving forward. The stars above watched silently, distant but steady, witnesses to our slow healing. And as I lay beneath that vast, endless sky, I felt the pulse of the earth beneath me, steady, sure, and unbroken. In the soft embrace of night, I realized that survival was not just about enduring. It was about the tender return to life, the slow, careful rekindling of hope, the quiet rebuilding of community, the gentle weaving of past and future into a new beginning. And with that thought, sleep came softly, wrapping me in its peaceful arms. The forest seemed to breathe in harmony with us, each leaf and twig a part of a quiet symphony that played beneath the endless sky. Days flowed into one another, gentle and unhurried, like the slow ripple of a stream winding through soft earth. The boy no longer spoke much, but his eyes held a new light, a quiet understanding, a connection to something beyond words. His fingers traced patterns in the dirt, small signs of a language only he seemed to know. These marks were more than shapes. They were threads tying the past to the present, fragile bridges over the silence left by loss. Ash prowled close, his presence a steady comfort. He brought us reminders of the wild world's resilience. A bird's feather caught in his claws, a smooth stone shaped by the river's endless caress. Each gift was a silent promise that life, even fragile and delicate, endured. The garden thrived under our care, stubborn shoots breaking through the dark soil, reaching for the sun with a fierce determination. We tended it with patient hands, knowing that healing was slow but sure, like the steady pulse beneath the earth. At night, the fire was our gathering place, a warm, flickering heart in the darkness. We shared little, but the silence between us was filled with unspoken memories and quiet hope. Sometimes the boy would hum a soft melody, a sound that floated through the cool night air like a whisper from a distant past. I listened to that melody, feeling it weave through the darkness, stitching together the broken pieces of our story. The plague had taken so much, yet in its wake, it left a space for something new, a slow, tender rebirth born from ashes and sorrow. The stars above, distant and serene, watched over us. Their cold light was a reminder of time's vastness and the enduring cycle of night and day, loss and renewal. As I lay beneath the canopy of ancient trees, the earth firm and steady beneath me, I felt a deep, quiet peace settle in my soul. The journey was far from over, but in the stillness of the night, there was a promise, a gentle assurance that life's fragile threads, woven carefully and with care, would carry us forward. And with that thought, I drifted into sleep, cradled by the soft breath of the world days past, slow and steady like the gentle ebb of a distant tide. The weight of silence hung over us, not as a burden, but as a fragile veil that wrapped around the edges of our lives, softening the sharpness of loss. We moved carefully through the world, learning again the rhythms of nature, the way the sun rose and set without fail, the way the wind whispered secrets through the branches, the way the soil held warmth beneath our fingers. The boy's quiet presence was a steady anchor. His hands shaped symbols in the dirt, and though words remained scarce, his eyes spoke volumes. They held memories too deep for speech, emotions too raw for sound. In those moments, I felt the vastness of what had been lost, and the fragile hope of what could be regained. Ash prowled nearby, a silent sentinel. His sharp eyes scanned the forest edges, ever watchful. He carried with him a wild grace, a reminder that life, even in its smallest forms, pressed onward. Our garden grew slowly, stubborn shoots piercing the earth, reaching for the light. Each leaf unfurled like a small miracle, a testament to endurance in the face of devastation. Evenings brought their own kind of comfort. We gathered around the fire, its flickering glow casting dancing shadows on weathered faces. There were no grand tales, no triumphant songs, only the quiet sharing of presence, the soft exchange of glances, the gentle acceptance of what was and what might be. Sometimes the boy hummed a melody so soft it seemed to blend with the crackling fire and the whispering trees. It was a sound that held both sorrow and peace, a lullaby for the wounded world. As night deepened, The stars emerge, cold and distant, yet constant. They watch silently over our fragile camp, their steady light a reminder of the vastness beyond our pain. Lying beneath the open sky, the earth firm beneath me, I felt the slow healing of time begin to weave its quiet magic. The scars left by the plague would never fully fade, but they were no longer wounds that defined us. Instead, they were part of the story we carried, a story of survival, of quiet strength, and of the gentle, unending return to life. And as sleep took me in its soft embrace, I knew that in this stillness there was hope. The world around us had softened, as if it too was learning to heal from wounds unseen but deeply felt. Morning light spilled over the horizon with a gentle touch, painting the sky in soft shades of rose and gold. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine and wildflowers, a quiet reminder that life, despite everything, was still growing. We moved with newfound patience, our steps lighter and more measured than before. The boy sat beneath a spreading oak, his fingers weaving patterns in the earth, a silent language of hope and remembrance. Though his voice was seldom heard, his presence spoke volumes, filling the spaces between us with an unspoken connection. Ash prowled near the thickets, his keen eyes catching the flutter of a bird's wings or the shimmer of a lizard slipping through the underbrush. He was a silent guardian, a steady thread linking us to the wild heartbeat of the forest. Our garden was no longer just a patch of earth. It had become a symbol. Tiny shoots pushing through the soil, fragile leaves unfolding toward the sky, blossoms slowly opening in the morning sun. We tended each plant with care, knowing that in nurturing the soil, we were nurturing ourselves. Evenings were a time of quiet gathering. We sat around the fire's gentle glow, its warmth chasing away the chill that lingered after dark. Conversations were sparse, but the silence was comfortable, filled with shared understanding and the slow rebuilding of trust. Sometimes, the boy would hum a melody, low and sweet, a psalm without words that seemed to echo the forest's own rhythms. It was a sound that soothed the ache in our hearts, a lullaby for the fragile world we were slowly reclaiming. Above us, the stars twinkled faintly, distant but unwavering. Their cold light was a silent witness to our journey, a reminder of the vastness beyond our small struggles. Lying beneath the night sky, I felt a deep stillness settle within me, a calm born of acceptance and quiet hope. The plague had left scars, yes, but it had also taught us the strength of gentle endurance, the power of slow, steady growth. And as sleep gently pulled me under, I carried with me the soft promise of a new dawn. The world awoke in slow, deliberate whispers. Dawn stretched its pale fingers across the sky, brushing away the lingering shadows of night with a tender, rosy light. The air was cool and still, filled with the soft sense of earth and growing things, a quiet symphony of life beginning anew. Each breath I took felt like a quiet prayer, a moment suspended between what had been and what might come. The boy sat nearby, tracing careful patterns in the dirt, his eyes fixed on the delicate dance of light and shadow. His silence was a language of its own, profound, deep, filled with the weight of memories and the faint stirrings of hope. Ash moved through the underbrush with the grace of a shadow, his emerald eyes reflecting the gentle hues of morning. He was a steadfast companion, a living reminder that even after devastation, the wild heart of the world continued to beat strong. Our garden had become a sanctuary. Tender shoots pushed bravely through the soil, reaching for the sun with fragile determination. Each new leaf was a small miracle, a testament to life's stubborn refusal to be extinguished. We tended the earth with hands that had known loss and pain, but also a fierce, quiet hope. The act of caring for these plants was a balm for our wounded spirits, a slow weaving of threads that connected us to the promise of renewal. As the day unfolded, light spilled into every corner of our small world. The forest seemed to breathe with us, a living, breathing tapestry of green and gold, of shadow and light. Birds sang tentative melodies, their songs weaving through the trees like gentle threads of sound. Evening came wrapped in the soft hush of twilight. Around the fire, faces glowed in the flickering light, etched with lines of sorrow but softened by the calm of survival. Words were few, but the silence was rich with shared understanding, with the slow rebuilding of trust and community. The boy hummed once more, a melody without words, a song carried on the night air like a promise. The stars above twinkled softly, distant but eternal, watching over us with quiet grace. Lying beneath that vast sky, I felt the slow pulse of dawn within me, a rhythm of healing, of gentle endurance, of life quietly reclaiming its place. And as sleep embraced me, I knew that the journey was far from over, but the path ahead was lit by the soft glow of hope. The days moved slowly, as if the very air was thick with reflection. Each morning, the sun rose with soft insistence, spilling golden light over the quiet landscape, painting the earth with warmth and possibility. The forest awoke in whispers, the rustle of leaves, the faint call of distant birds, like secrets shared just between the wind and the trees. I walked among the tall trunks, feeling the pulse of the earth beneath my feet, steady and unyielding. The soil held the memory of countless seasons, each layer a testament to time's patient passage. In that moment, it was easy to believe that life's steady heartbeat would outlast even the darkest shadows. The boy sat near a cluster of wildflowers, his hands shaping small shapes in the dirt, symbols of hope carved into the earth itself. His eyes, once clouded with silence, now held a flicker of something more, a quiet understanding, a bond with the land that surrounded us. Ash, ever watchful, prowled the edge of the clearing, his senses sharp and alert. His presence was a reminder that even in a world altered by loss, the wild spirit of life endured, fierce, persistent, unbroken. Our garden grew slowly but surely. Every leaf that unfurled was a victory against the silence, every blossom a soft rebellion against the shadows. We nurtured it with patient hands, knowing that in tending these fragile shoots, we were nurturing our own fragile hope. Evenings became a sanctuary, the fire's glow a gentle heart beating against the night's cold silence. Around it, we gathered, speaking little but sharing everything in the quiet exchange of glances, the unspoken comfort of presence. The boy's humming rose once more, a soft melody weaving through the night air, wrapping us in a blanket of calm and memory. The stars above were steady, distant watchers who had seen generations come and go, their light a timeless thread connecting past, present, and future. Lying beneath the vast sky, I felt the earth's whisper beneath me, a slow, steady promise that life would endure, that even after devastation, growth would find its way. And as sleep gently took me, I carried with me the soft rhythm of the earth, patient, enduring, hopeful. The world had settled into a fragile balance, a quiet calm that seemed to pulse with a hidden life. The sky stretched wide above us, endless and pale, while the earth beneath our feet held steady, carrying the weight of all that had come before. Morning came slowly, with a softness that softened even the sharpest edges of memory. The light filtered through the leaves in gentle shafts, dappling the forest floor with patterns of gold and shadow. The air was cool and clean, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and growing things, a subtle reminder that life, despite everything, pressed forward. The boy sat by the stream, his fingers tracing delicate lines in the sand. His silence was a quiet song, filled with the weight of what had been lost and the faint glow of hope that still remained. I watched him, seeing in his stillness a reflection of the slow healing that had begun to take root within all of us. Ash padded softly nearby, his emerald eyes bright and alert. He moved like a guardian of the wild, a steady presence that bridged the gap between the past and the present. His quiet strength was a balm, a reminder that life's fierce pulse never truly fades. Our garden thrived under the gentle care we gave it. Tiny shoots pushed bravely through the soil, unfurling leaves that reached toward the sun with stubborn determination. Each new bud was a quiet triumph, a testament to resilience and the slow, steady work of renewal. As evening fell, we gathered around the fire's warm glow. The flames flickered and danced, casting long shadows that whispered of stories both old and new. Words were few, but the silence between us was rich, filled with shared memories, quiet understanding, and the fragile hope that stitched our lives back together. The boy hummed his soft melody once more, the notes floating through the night like a gentle breeze. Above us, the stars shimmered quietly, distant and eternal witnesses to the cycles of loss and rebirth. Lying beneath the open sky, I felt a deep peace settle in my bones. The plague had left scars, yes, but it had also taught us the quiet strength of endurance, the gentle power of time, and the unyielding hope carried in the soft pulse of dawn. And as sleep took me, I held that hope close, knowing that even in the darkest night, the slow return to life was always underway. The sky above stretched endlessly, a vast canvas of muted blues and soft grays, touched by the first tender light of morning. It bore witness to everything, to loss, to survival, to the quiet stirrings of new life beneath its vastness. The air was cool, filled with the scent of moss and damp earth, carrying the faint echo of forgotten rains. The forest stood still, a silent guardian of memories both harsh and hopeful, its ancient limbs swaying gently with the soft breath of the wind. The boy moved slowly through the undergrowth, his fingers brushing leaves and twigs, as if seeking some secret language written in the forest itself. His silence was a cloak that shielded a depth of feeling too heavy for words, yet in his stillness, there was a strange kind of strength, a steady pulse beneath the quiet. Ash padded nearby, ever alert, his bright eyes flickering with cautious curiosity. He was a shadow among shadows, A reminder that life's wild heart beats steady and true, even in the aftermath of devastation. Our garden thrived in the soft light, a patch of green defying the scars etched by the plague. Each new shoot was a small miracle, a fragile thread of hope woven into the fabric of our lives. We cared for these plants with reverent hands, knowing that tending them was more than just survival. It was an act of faith. As dusk settled, the fire's warm glow became a beacon in the gathering dark. We gathered close, our faces marked by hardship but softened by the quiet comfort of companionship. Words were rare, but the silence was rich, filled with the weight of shared grief and the tentative promise of healing. The boy's gentle humming rose again, a soft, wordless song that floated like a whisper on the cool night air. The stars above, distant and steady, shimmered faintly, timeless witnesses to our fragile resilience. Lying beneath the infinite sky, I felt the earth beneath me, solid, enduring, patient. The plague's shadow had been long and dark, but here, in this moment, I sensed the slow, steady pulse of life reclaiming its place. And as sleep folded around me like a soft shawl, I held on to that quiet hope, a hope born not in grand gestures, but in the gentle, unending rhythm of dawn. The morning broke with a softness that seemed almost fragile, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Pale light filtered through the canopy, touching leaves and stones with a gentle glow. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of rain long past, mingled with the subtle sweetness of blooming wildflowers. I walked slowly, the earth firm beneath my feet, each step a reminder of the journey we had survived, a passage through darkness and despair toward this fragile dawn. The forest around me was alive with quiet movement, a bird's soft flutter, the distant murmur of a brook, the gentle rustle of leaves stirred by a shy breeze. The boy sat near the roots of an ancient oak, tracing circles in the dirt with a stick, lost in thought. His eyes, once shadowed by silence, now held a glimmer, a small spark of something unspoken but deeply felt. His presence was steady, like the trees themselves, rooted in the soil of survival and slow renewal. Ash prowled nearby, his keen senses alert to the whispers of the forest. He was a shadow blending with the light, a guardian of the wild that remained untouched by the plague's cruel hand. His companionship was a comfort, a living thread woven through the tapestry of our fragile lives. Our garden had grown into a small sanctuary, green and vibrant against the backdrop of a recovering world. Tender shoots pushed through the earth, reaching toward the sky, each leaf a quiet triumph over the silence left behind. We nurtured the plants with careful hands, knowing that in their slow growth lay a promise that life would continue, even in the smallest, most delicate forms. As the day waned, we gathered once more by the fire's gentle glow. The flames flickered, casting shadows that danced softly against the trees. We spoke little, for words felt heavy and unnecessary. Instead, we shared a quiet companionship, the kind born of shared loss and the steady work of rebuilding. The boy's humming floated into the night air, a soft, haunting melody that wrapped around us like a soothing balm. Above, the stars blinked silently, distant but ever present, their cold light a steady reminder of time's endless flow. Lying beneath the vast sky, I felt the gentle pulse of the earth beneath me, steady, patient, unyielding. The plague's shadow still lingered, but within that darkness, life's quiet resilience shone through, a soft beacon guiding us forward. And as sleep gently took me, I carried with me the enduring hope of a new day. The days unfolded like a slow, whispered secret, each one blending softly into the next. The morning light filtered through the forest canopy with a tender grace, dappling the ground with gentle patterns of gold and green. The air was crisp, carrying the subtle scent of pine and earth, a quiet reminder of the life that persisted beneath the shadow of loss. I moved through the woods with a careful tread, feeling the soft give of moss beneath my feet and the steady rhythm of the earth's pulse. The boy was near, his hands shaping delicate signs in the soil, silent words written for the trees to keep. His eyes, once distant and closed off, now held a quiet depth, a language spoken without sound, a communion with the world's slow awakening. Ash was a shadow at my side, his keen gaze watching the shifting light and listening to the forest's soft murmur. He was a sentinel of the wild, a reminder that even after the plague's cruel silence, the heartbeat of the natural world remained strong and true. Our garden grew with patient care, each new sprout a small victory over the silence left by death. We nurtured the fragile green shoots as if they were the last hope, knowing that in their growth lay the promise of renewal and the slow return of color to a muted world. Evenings were quiet and sacred. We gathered around the fire's warm glow, its flickering light a balm against the cool dark. Words were few, but the shared presence spoke volumes, a communion of souls bound by loss and the tentative hope of new beginnings. The boy's humming rose once again, soft and steady, a psalm without words that floated through the night air like a gentle breeze. The stars above shimmered quietly, eternal watchers of the endless cycle of night and day, death and life. Lying beneath the open sky, I felt the weight of the world ease, carried away on the soft breath of the forest. The plague's shadow was long, but in the gentle echoes of this quiet place, I sensed the slow, steady pulse of life reclaiming its rhythm. And as sleep enfolded me in its tender embrace, I held close the fragile promise of dawn. The forest around us breathed softly in the morning light, each leaf trembling with the gentle caress of a breeze that seemed to carry away the heaviness of days long past. The world was waking slowly, cautiously, as if testing its own capacity to begin again. I wandered along the narrow path, feeling the cool earth beneath my feet, the pulse of life in every blade of grass and every whisper of wind. The boy was nearby, his small hands tracing circles in the dirt, a silent ritual of remembrance and hope. His eyes reflected the pale morning sun, brightening with a quiet resolve that spoke of healing, slow, steady, and sure. Ash padded beside us, a silent shadow blending with the dappled light. His presence was a constant reassurance, a living thread weaving us back into the fabric of this recovering world. He paused now and then, alert to the smallest sound, a guardian of the fragile peace we had found. Our garden flourished quietly. Sprouts pushed stubbornly through the soil, leaves unfurling like tiny green flames reaching toward the sky. Each new bloom was a testament to endurance, a quiet victory against the darkness that had threatened to consume us. As dusk settled, the fire's amber glow cast a warm circle around us. We sat close, the silence between us comfortable and full, filled with memories that were both heavy and healing. Words were not needed. Our shared presence was enough. The boy hummed softly, a tune that rose and fell with the rhythm of the night, a lullaby for a world slowly waking from its long, dark dream. Above, the stars glimmered faintly, distant yet unwavering, their light a silent promise of continuity and hope. Lying beneath the vast sky, I felt the deep stillness within, the quiet renewal that comes after storms have passed. The plague's shadow remained, a scar etched into the earth and into our souls. But here, in this fragile moment, life whispered its steadfast truth. And as sleep wrapped me gently, I held close the steady pulse of dawn, the slow and sure beginning of all things new. The morning arrived quietly, wrapped in a veil of mist that softened the edges of the world. Trees stood like ancient sentinels, their branches heavy with dew, shimmering faintly in the pale light. The air was still, yet full of the subtle hum of life awakening, the tiny stirrings of insects, the distant call of a lone bird. I walked slowly along the winding path, feeling the soft earth beneath my feet and the steady rhythm of my breath. The boy followed nearby, his small fingers tracing lines in the dirt, a silent meditation on the world's fragile beauty. His eyes, once clouded with sorrow, now held a gentle light, a quiet acceptance of all that had been lost and a tentative hope for what might come. Ash moved silently beside us, his senses alert to every sound and shadow. He was a constant presence, a reminder that even in the aftermath of destruction, life's wild heart still beats strong and sure. Our garden had grown into a sanctuary of green amid the muted landscape. Tender shoots pushed through the soil, leaves unfurling like tiny flags of resilience. We tended the plants with careful hands, each new but a quiet declaration that life would endure. As evening fell, the fire's glow became a beacon in the gathering dusk. We gathered close, our faces softened by the flickering light. Words were few, but the silence was rich with meaning, shared memories, quiet healing, and the unspoken promise of renewal. The boy's humming rose softly, a gentle melody that floated through the cool night air. Above, the stars twinkled faintly, distant yet constant, their light a timeless thread connecting past and future. Lying beneath the vast sky, I felt a deep calm settle within me, the embrace of silence after a long storm. The plague's shadow lingered still, but here, in this fragile moment, life whispered its enduring truth, that even in darkness, there is always a glimmer of dawn. And as sleep gently took me, I held that glimmer close, a soft beacon in the quiet night. The days passed with a rhythm all their own, neither hurried nor still, but a quiet unfolding. Morning light spilled softly through the branches, painting the forest floor with dappled gold. The scent of damp earth and growing things filled the air, a subtle reminder that life continued, even when shadowed by loss. I walked slowly, the soft crunch of leaves beneath my feet a steady beat in the quiet. The boy sat near a cluster of wildflowers, his hands shaping patterns in the dirt, silent stories told with tender care. His eyes, once distant and shadowed, now gleamed faintly with a fragile hope, as though the world itself whispered secrets only he could hear. Ash padded beside us, alert and watchful. His presence was a quiet comfort, a reminder that even in the wake of devastation, the wild heart of the world remained strong and true. Our garden thrived beneath the gentle touch of time. Tiny shoots broke through the soil, reaching for the sky with delicate insistence. Each new leaf was a small triumph, a sign that life's slow bloom was unfolding despite the scars left behind. As twilight settled, the fire flickered and danced, casting a warm glow that softened the edges of the darkening woods. We gathered close, our voices low and steady, weaving threads of quiet conversation into the night. Words were fewer now, replaced by the deep understanding born of shared experience. The boys' humming rose softly once more, a gentle song that floated on the cool evening breeze. The stars above twinkled faintly, eternal witnesses to the cycles of loss and renewal. Lying beneath the vast sky, I felt the slow bloom of peace unfurl within me, a quiet resilience taking root in the fertile soil of memory and hope. The plague's shadow was still there, but it no longer held us captive. Instead, it was a reminder of what had been endured, and what might yet be. And as sleep wrapped around me like a soft, warm cloak, I carried with me the slow bloom of a new beginning. The morning air was cool and still, holding a quiet promise beneath the pale sky. The world stretched out softly around us, fields and forests blending into one another in a gentle haze of green and gold. The light was tender, as if reluctant to disturb the fragile peace that had settled after so much loss. I walked slowly through the undergrowth, each step a careful imprint on the soft earth. The boy moved beside me, silent but present, his eyes tracing patterns in the light and shadow. His face held the quiet patience of someone learning to live again, to trust in the slow unfolding of days that came after the darkest nights. Ash prowled nearby, ever watchful, a steady guardian of this fragile new world. His presence was a comfort, a living thread connecting us to the wild pulse of life that still beat beneath the scars. Our garden thrived in its humble corner of the earth. Young shoots pushed upward with delicate determination, leaves unfurling like small flags of resilience. Each bud was a quiet declaration, a soft horizon toward which we reached with hopeful hands. As dusk drew near, the fire's glow cast flickering shadows that danced among the trees. We gathered close, the silence between us rich and full, a shared space where grief and healing coexisted. Words were few but meaningful, each breath a quiet offering of companionship. The boy's humming rose gently into the night, a lullaby without words that wrapped around us like a warm embrace. The stars above shimmered faintly, distant yet constant, their light a steady guide through the endless cycles of loss and renewal. Lying beneath the vast sky, I felt the soft horizon of peace stretch out within me, a calm, steady line where past and future met in quiet understanding. The plague's shadow lingered still, but it no longer defined us. Instead, it became part of the landscape we now walked, a scar that told of survival and the gentle strength of new beginnings. And as sleep came softly, I held close the soft horizon, the promise of another day, another dawn. The light of dawn crept softly through the trees, brushing the forest in a delicate wash of pale gold. The world felt hushed, as if the very air was holding a breath, waiting patiently for the slow passage of time to weave its healing thread. I moved quietly along the familiar path, the damp earth cool beneath my feet. The boy walked beside me, his gaze thoughtful, tracing invisible patterns in the rising mist. His silence was no longer a weight, but a space filled with quiet strength, a calm acceptance of the fragile beauty that remained. Ash padded silently close, a shadow among shadows, vigilant yet peaceful. His presence was a reminder that life continued in many forms, resilient and unyielding, beneath the scars of what had passed. Our garden bloomed modestly, each new leaf a soft testament to patience and care. The plant's reach for the light was steady determination, a quiet promise that growth was possible even after devastation. As evening settled, we gathered near the fire's gentle glow, its flickering light a comforting rhythm against the deepening dark. We spoke little, for words were fragile things in the face of so much loss, yet our shared presence held a deeper meaning, a silent covenant of survival and hope. The boy's humming floated through the cool night air, a gentle melody that wrapped around us like a soothing balm. Above, the stars glimmered faintly, distant sentinels watching over the endless cycles of endings and beginnings. Lying beneath the vast sky, I felt the gentle passage of time in my bones, slow, steady, healing. The plague's shadow was still etched in memory, but here, in this soft moment, life whispered its enduring promise. And as sleep drew me into its quiet embrace, I held close the gentle passage, the steady flow of days unfolding, one after another, toward the dawn. The morning unfolded quietly, wrapped in a soft mist that clung to the trees like a gentle veil. The world felt tender and slow, as if time itself had taken a deep breath and paused, allowing healing to seep into every corner. I walked through the forest with measured steps, the earth beneath my feet cool and steady. The boy was close, his fingers brushing the moss and fallen leaves, tracing the delicate patterns of nature's quiet artistry. His eyes, once clouded by fear and grief, now held a fragile light, a soft beacon guiding us through the lingering shadows. Ash moved silently beside us, a vigilant presence woven seamlessly into the rhythm of the forest. His calm gaze and steady breath were reminders that life, though fragile, persisted with quiet determination. Our garden flourished, a small patch of green defying the remnants of the plague's desolation. Tender shoots pushed upward, leaves unfurling slowly in the gentle light. Each growth was a small victory, a symbol of the breath of time carrying us forward. As dusk fell, the fire flickered warmly, casting gentle shadows that danced across our faces. We gathered close, the silence between us filled with unspoken understanding, a shared acknowledgement of loss, and a quiet hope for the days yet to come. The boy's humming rose softly, a lullaby without words that wrapped the night in comfort. Above us, the stars shone faintly, eternal and unchanging, their distant light a steady guide through the ebb and flow of life. Lying beneath the vast sky, I felt the slow, steady breath of time settle within me, a calm rhythm that promised renewal and resilience. The shadow of the plague remained, but it no longer defined us. Instead, it was a part of the landscape we now navigated, a memory woven into the fabric of our lives. And as sleep gently closed my eyes, I carried with me the breath of time, a quiet, enduring hope that tomorrow would come.